Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver George Pickens just crashed out by unfollowing the Steelers on social media after a report came out that the Steelers are now fielding trade calls on George Pickens and also making calls as well. But first, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news and updates. Also, the draft is today, and every new player we get, I will be covering it, so stay tuned. Now, let's get right back into the video. So, George Pickens apparently unfollowed the Pittsburgh Steelers on all social media, IG, and everything after a report came out by Schultz saying that the Steelers have taken and made calls on a potential George Pickens trade. So, just in case if you didn't see Omar Khan's press conference from a few days ago, he said in the interview that no, he is happy to have George Pickens on the team alongside DK Metcalf, and the Steelers aren't looking to trade him. Not exactly those words, but that's what you could take out of his interview, that they aren't looking to trade him and want to have him on the team. However, the next day, a report came out that the Steelers are now taking calls and making calls around the NFL to trade wide receiver George Pickens. So those two reports are conflicting one another. The report that they are kind of in the market with him is conflicting what Omar Khan actually said. But apparently that's true. So let's just look at what the report actually said. So Jordan Schultz said this. He said, George Pickens is one intriguing trade name to watch. Pittsburgh has taken and made calls on the talented wide receiver who's now extension eligible. After paying Metcalf, league sources are skeptical the Steelers will pay two receivers. Multiple teams have brought up Steelers wide receiver George Pickens in trade discussions, and he's a name to watch this week. Pittsburgh isn't actively shopping him, but the conversations are being had. End quote. So, that report came out yesterday, and it had everyone of Steelers Nation kind of freaking out on social media when they saw that report, because it put into perspective, hey, the Steelers wide receiver room may be worse this year than it was last year if they trade away George Pickens, because they lose Mike Williams, they lose other wide receivers in free agency, and they're basically just replacing DK Metcalf and George Pickens with one another. So that wide receiver room would be worse in my eyes and the Steelers fans' eyes as well. So that's what they looked at and they saw, and they didn't want the trade to happen. But on the other hand, you have some fans saying, hey, if the Steelers can get a second round pick for George Pickens, you have to do it. You might as well just trade George Pickens away. But in reality, that doesn't make sense. I'll get more into it as the video goes along, but you're going to be trying to draft a wide receiver in the second round with that pick that you get, hoping that that wide receiver turns out anything like George Pickens, talent-wise, on the football field. So why not just have the actual George Pickens on your team instead of trying to draft one to replace him? It just doesn't make sense. I'll get more into it, but that's the thoughts that are going around Steelers Nation right now after this report came out. So, now, George Pickens kind of crashed out a little bit and unfollowed the Steelers on social media because of this. So, before the Steelers kind of traded for DK Metcalf, and even after he traded for DK Metcalf, you look at George Pickens' social media and he was following the Steelers. Everything was fine. But now, yesterday, when people were checking to see if he actually was, no, he's not anymore. It's completely gone. He removed Steelers from his social media, and that kind of counts as a crash out, I guess, a little bit. So George Pickens is no longer following Steelers, and it puts the trade rumors into a swirl, because now people are saying, hey, this might actually be true, and he knows it, and he unfollowed them because of it. So that's a little thing that's going around Steeler Nation right now in the rumor world. Me personally, when I look at what Omar Khan said, I do believe what he's saying, that the Pittsburgh Steelers are or do like George Pickens and the DK Metcalf duo. But at the same time, I do believe that teams are trying to trade for George Pickens. and maybe the narrative is getting switched, saying the Steelers are also making calls on George Pickens. I don't think that's true, but just going off reports, apparently that's what's happening. I know for sure a report just came out, said that the Packers are very interested in George Pickens and are making calls with the Steelers with him. So maybe the narrative is getting switched around the league to make it look like George Pickens and the Steelers are coming to an end, just to maybe get more leverage in a trade. Maybe that's what's going on, but you really don't know. You're not inside the Steelers circle, so everyone else is just putting a report out there and saying what they've heard. Anyway, let's look at George Pickens and what other reporters, insiders had to say. Because the one that covers the Pittsburgh Steelers and the AFC North the most is Aditi Kikabala, and he says the Steelers would love to receive a really good trade offer for George Pickens to basically get rid of him. That's what she said today. Also, when you look at what Adam Schefter said, the top NFL insider, he said that the Pittsburgh Steelers' George Pickens is a name that he thinks is expendable in terms of a draft day trade. Someone who can get traded and the Pittsburgh Steelers would move. And he's heard that name flying out there. So there's many reporters coming out and saying that they've heard George Pickens as a name to be traded. Hopefully that's not the case, personally, for the Steelers offense, because I think a great duo can be made of DK Metcalf and George Pickens, and I really want to see that with a quarterback. But apparently that's what's happening. George Pickens unfollows the Steelers on social media because of it, and a crash out is happening with all Steeler Nation. So, now, to get more into it about why this shouldn't happen, or maybe why we shouldn't believe it. Well, you have to take Omar Khan's word. So far, what Omar Khan has said, he's basically done. But on top of it, when just looking at George Pickens as a player, he's still on his rookie contract for one more year. And this is the best time they probably can get something for him, but he's also a free agent at the end of the season. So maybe the value wouldn't be there. You have to take that into consideration as well. But at the same time, the Steelers can probably franchise tag him, keep him around for $20 million, and not have to spend a big amount on another wide receiver. So they probably can do that to keep him around. It's not like they have to pay him a huge contract right away. They can franchise tag him. But at the same time, the Pittsburgh Steelers may use that pick elsewhere. Maybe they use that pick and they want more picks for next year's NFL draft when it's in Pittsburgh, and they want more picks then. So you have to take into consideration everything that may be going through the Steelers' minds, but at the same time, just looking from an outside perspective, non-business related, just strictly football. George Pickens is a really good wide receiver, and people probably don't realize it, but he's really good. And if he continues to grow at the rate he's growing right now at the wide receiver position, all he really needs is to try 100% of the time and work on his route running, and he's already one of the best wide receiver hands in football, and then he'll become the best if he works on everything else. So, George Pickens, coming into this year? He's a top 15, 10 receiver in the NFL, and is a player that you draft in the draft. Whatever round you get, round 2, is that player going to be anything like George Pickens? Or are you just hoping that he's going to become a good wide receiver? Because that's what it basically is. You're hoping whatever player you draft, it doesn't matter if it's a first round, second round, third round, or a seventh round. You're hoping that player turns out the way you hope that they do. And most of the time, that just doesn't work out. So why not just keep George Pickens around, who's already developed all those skills and is already good? It just doesn't make sense why you would want to draft a wide receiver with the pick that you get back for George Pickens. That just doesn't make sense. George Pickens is good. We all know he's a little bit of a crash out, but he's doing that for a good reason, because he wants to win football games. And he wants to be a reason and be a part of winning football games. So at least it's for a good reason, not a bad reason. And one last thing, the Steelers traded a second round pick for DK Metcalf. They should get nothing less than a second-round pick for George Pickens. They will 100% receive a third-round compensatory draft pick if George Pickens leaves next year and doesn't have a contract extension. So nothing less than a second, but to be honest, he's worth a first. And the people trying to trade him for less are crazy. Top 10 talents like him don't just magically appear on your football team. So, George Pickens. This is the rumors going around with him, and that's the end of this video. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on the topic of basically all the reporters coming out and saying George Pickens' name is on the trade block. And then Omar Khan coming out and saying, no, we're not looking to trade him, basically. Do you think the Steelers will trade him? Do you not want to trade him? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And also, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news, updates, highlights, analysis, reports, everything surrounding the Steelers today with the draft and this weekend with the draft. I'll be covering it. Every new player will be on the channel. So stay tuned for everything. Like, comment, and subscribe. And until the next video, a little bit later when the Steelers are on the clock and make their selection, I'm out. Peace.